Coming up later in this show, my daughter can't help being a werewolf. But first, man dog. My dog is a werewolf. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I would like to alert you and your listeners to the fact that werewolfism is not merely an illness affecting human beings. It can be caught by canines as well, including your house pet. I learned this the hard way, back in the 90s, when my mixed breed mutt named after Data from the Star Trek got infected and became a werewolf for the last 4 years of his life. Those were not easy years either for us or for him. Still, he lived to be 12, which is not all that bad in dog years. We had to put up with an awful lot toward the end though. When he passed, it was during the new moon and had nothing to do with his werewolfism. So this was not a tragic thing, really. Data had a family surrounding him, who were all pulling for him. Otherwise it would have ended much sooner, and much nastier as well. So I'll try to start this at the beginning, but none of us really can be sure what the actual beginning was. He was 8 years old before the first time he became that other thing, and he only changed on the full moon. Someone once suggested to me that he always had been a dog man, but he only matured at age 8. That wouldn't explain why he only walked upright under the full moon though. And that wouldn't explain why he grew human ears when he transformed, just as humans are said to grow dog ears when they become a werewolf. So how did this happen to my dog Data? Was he bitten by a human being? I mean, we don't know that he wasn't. So here is what happened the first time Data the dog transformed. I was inside the house and I heard the dog growling at something out back. Then I thought I heard something larger growling back at my dog. From the sound of it, there must have been a bear or a timber wolf or something big, facing off against my pet. So I grabbed a baseball bat and I headed outside. But when I got out there, it looked to me like Data wasn't facing anything larger than a squirrel that was up in a tree. I was confused about where that growling was coming from. So I walked out there into the yard to see what was going on. Well, that was a mistake. Data turned to face me, and I screamed. His head wasn't his head anymore. It was sort of like a skibbity toilet moment way back in the 80s or 90s. It was this guy's head on my dog's body. And so I screamed. To be clear, it was not an ordinary man's head. It looked like he was transforming into a man and then stopped somewhere about a third of the way through the process. It was horrible to look at. Sort of nauseating, really. His head had grown taller, as though his brain had as well. He had a forehead now, and he had human ears on the sides of his head. He also still had his dog ears on top, though. That's what I mean when I say he looked like he got stuck in the middle of transforming into a human. It wasn't just his head that was weird either. His arms looked much more human than before. Yeah, I said arms, but I mean his front legs. Now they looked like arms, and one of them was nearly bald. That made it look even more human than the other one, which was still covered in fur. Neither arm had a hand at the end, but the paws that were there were more like clawed hands than paws anyway. As far as I can remember, his back end was mostly the same as before, but he seemed far more energetic, and he seemed far more feral and angry as well. I know I said he had grown a forehead, and I know it looked like his brain must have grown larger, but he certainly did not act any more intelligent. In fact, he seemed downright stupid to me. I called out to my dog questioningly, wondering what had happened to him. He turned his attention toward me, and then I swear he bared his teeth and crouched down, making a snarling sound, like a wild animal might. He was about to pounce on me. My own dog of 8 years had lost his mind. I ran to the house, and he sprinted after me. I screamed and he landed on my back, which sent me into a panic. I spun around, allowing my momentum to pull me down, and I landed hard on my dog, who was no longer my dog, but a man dog. This worked to knock the wind out of him enough that I bounced off and got a few steps head start on him toward the back door. Data, or whatever the hell he had become, got up and ran after me on his hind legs. I was screaming like I saw a ghost or the boogeyman, I swear to you. The whole world had gone crazy. It was insane. Or maybe I was insane. I got my hand on the doorknob, but Data was right behind me. So I closed my eyes and swung my Louisville Slugger as hard as I could. I felt it hit the monster that was once my dog so hard. I'd have cleared the fences in a Major League ballpark with that hit. It only knocked that monster back a couple of steps though, and he fell on his butt. That gave me time to get inside and close the heavy door behind me. Only a second before the man dog threw all of his weight into it. I hadn't even had a chance to lock it yet, but believe me, I double locked it once I could. The man dog ran off into the night, and I had no idea what I should do about it. Should I go out and hunt my own dog down? What if he attacked someone out there? I didn't know what had happened to him. Maybe he had some kind of rabies. Maybe I should call the cops about him. I talked about it with my wife, the one I was married to in those days. She felt I might only cause a panic. We had seen the man dog running toward the woods. My wife felt that he was out hunting smaller prey. She didn't think he'd run into town or anything like that. And if he did, half the town was carrying heat in those days, so the problem would get taken care of in all likelihood. Her thinking seemed cold to me, which I think is why we eventually divorced. But I followed her advice that night anyway. Honestly, I was too scared to go out there after that man dog anyway. When it stood up on its hind legs, it was taller than I was. Plus, I didn't want to hurt Data, but he had no qualms at all about trying to hurt me. It wouldn't be a fair fight, you know? So basically we spent the night watching TV programs scheduled for us by the rich, which was what everyone all did at the same time in those days. And then we went to bed after Jay Leno's monologue. In the morning, it was like none of this had happened. Data was at the back door looking like his old friendly self again, asking for breakfast. I was so happy to see him. I didn't think twice about flinging the door open and giving him a big hug. I threw his frisbee and we launched right into a game like nothing had ever happened. In fact, if my wife hadn't also seen him running into the woods on his hind legs the night before, I would have just decided that I was working too hard, and I had imagined the entire episode. But my wife had seen the man dog, and she ordered me to figure out what to do before nightfall brought the monster back. I rigged up our basement with a heavy-duty chain and a collar that was supposed to be strong enough to hold a lion. I installed a new strong security door at the entrance to the staircase leading down to the cellar. Then, when the late afternoon came, I brought Data downstairs with some food and water and some of his toys, and I chained him up. Then we played games and hung out, and we both fell asleep together down there in each other's arms. I woke up with a blanket thrown over me, so my wife must have been brave enough to venture downstairs and check the scene out. Data didn't become the man dog again the next night either. I declared the entire thing a fluke, but my then wife noted that it had happened on the night of the full moon. I checked the calendar and she was right. So the next month, I started chaining the boy up in the basement 2 days before the calendar said the full moon was gonna be. Sure enough, on the third night, that dog turned into a freak all over again. I had to run upstairs and bolt the door from the other side. The most horrible noises came from downstairs, and my wife forced me upstairs to bed where I couldn't sleep. This was how we lived for the last 4 years of that boy's life. I wish I could understand how this had started. Then maybe I might have been able to figure out what to do about it. My wife suggested that I speak to the pastor at our church. Possibly the dog is possessed, she reasoned. So after church one Sunday, I made an appointment to talk to the pastor in private about it. when I explained that my dog transformed once a month into a werewolf man dog. He remained very quiet. After some extended silence, he suggested that we both pray for guidance on this subject, and then he opened the door for me to leave. When I got home, my wife told me that she'd received a panicked call from our pastor, telling her that her husband had lost his mind and urging her to leave town before I got back home. Needless to say, we found a different church, and we never told that second pastor about our man-dog problem. There was one time that I saw Data change on a day that was not the full moon, and that is a story unto itself. He and I had been playing frisbee, and then we were sitting together on a warm autumn evening. It was sundown and just starting to get a little bit chilly. I was waiting to get in the mood to walk home for dinner when both of us saw this white light off in the woods. It was dusk, not quite dark yet, but not daytime anymore either, and I couldn't figure out what could be making such a bright light. I felt a sense of alarm that it might be a car or a motorcycle or something driving right at me and Data through the woods. So I stood up, trying to see it better. When the light emerged from the foliage, I didn't see any vehicle or person behind it. I just saw what looked like a very bright, big light, and that seemed to be all it was. There was nothing behind it. There wasn't anything behind it, and I couldn't see what the light was made of other than light itself. As the light came into the clearing that I was in with Data, I noticed for the first time that the dog was standing at attention on all fours, staring intently directly forward at this light, frozen in place and unmoving. And then I noticed he had the man-dog head, and he had the man-dog arms. He was the man-dog, but he had not gone feral. He had frozen into place, staring directly at the light in front of us. He was so still that I couldn't be sure he was still breathing. I had never seen anything like this in my life. I've never seen anything like it again either. Suddenly the bright light lifted straight up into the air, and Data stood up on his hind legs to watch it disappear into the sky. Only it was Data again, not the man-dog. He barked at the light as it receded upward and out of our sight, and then the two of us walked home. How I wished I could ask that dog questions about what had just happened. I wished I could get answers from him about what was going on. I wondered if that light had something to do with him becoming a were-dog, and I still wonder about that to this day. I suppose it might have just been a random weird thing that happened to us, but I guess I'll never know. I took him to a vet I had known for almost 20 years, but the guy listened to my story and then told me I needed a shrink. He told me that Data should be taken away from me, since I was having fantasies that he was a werewolf. I asked him if he wanted to come to my house on the full moon, and he asked me if I could hear how crazy I sounded. He told me that if I came back to him with a video that supposedly showed my dog becoming a werewolf, he would take moves to have me committed. My lawyer told me a vet couldn't have me committed, but I became rattled from his extreme reaction. I really didn't want a reputation as a lunatic or a dog abuser, so then I became afraid to tell anyone what was going on. Now so many years have passed and I'm so old that I just don't care if you think I'm crazy anymore. And that's the story of Data, the man-dog. Story number 2. My daughter can't help being a werewolf. Dear Scary Stories NYC. I'm a man trying to raise a teenage daughter without her mother, who passed away some years back. It's the legacy of her mother that Stacy has to live with. You see, my wife was a werewolf, and now that Stacy is becoming an adult, she is following in her mother's footsteps, unfortunately. This girl was shy growing up, but she's practically a recluse now. She can transform 2 or sometimes 3 times a month, and it is around the full moon. But she can start to grow hair on her arms or her eyebrows thicken, or she even starts to get a sort of a 5 o'clock shadow just randomly, unannounced. and she doesn't even sense it happening. This can be a hard time for any young person, but a girl suddenly growing a beard randomly is a terrible setback to her social life, which hadn't even really had a chance to begin yet. I want to find specialists to take her to, but Stacy doesn't want to end up in medical journals and then history books as the freak wolf girl. I tell her that she'd be helping other girls like herself out, but that doesn't help. That's the kind of thing that matters to guys, I think. Stacy told me she wants to have a family of her own, and she wants to sacrifice for them, not for some random idea of other girls like her. She doesn't want attention. She wants love and a husband and children, but she's not going to get them if she's afraid to come out of her room. Stacy's still got half her senior year in high school to make up for, but she says she will get an equivalency diploma someday. Neither of us care about her going to college because, we're not communists who hate America, so my only concern is helping my daughter find a way to meet other guys around her age that she can socialize with, guys who are going to be men about her situation and not little babies. She's going to need a guy who's up to the task of being a husband to a woman who changes when it's the full moon. Well, I mean even more than usual. I have not had to lock Stacy up when she transforms. In fact, she usually stays next to me, whimpering through the entire episode. I'm not sure it will get worse, but she says she feels that it will. She has not fully transformed yet, but the situation does seem to progress a little each month. At this rate, even if it continues worsening, I still don't think she would fully transform until she was in her later 20s. Maybe it comes in spurts though, and maybe next month I'll be finding myself fending off a feral animal. Or maybe next week. Or maybe never. Not all dogs are prone toward viciousness. And some wild canines never get good at hunting and have to scavenge instead. So even if Stacy does progress into more severe transformations as she moves into adulthood, I don't consider it a guarantee that she would necessarily have to be a nasty one. Some dogs are timid and scared. Have you ever comforted a dog during a thunderstorm? Stacy's been that kind of werewolf, at least so far. I don't think this situation makes her stronger. I think that for her, this really is a curse or an illness. Sooner or later I will prevail upon my daughter to let me bring her around to be examined. Maybe because her case seems milder than the other ones I hear about on your channel and elsewhere, she might be able to be cured. And that might open doors to this subject being discussed more openly. We can't bring an end to werewolfism until we allow it out of the closet and allow science to study the subject. Any doctor right now who announced that he was going to study lycanthropy would be ending his own career. Well, maybe Stacy and I can change that. Or maybe she'll win out and remain in hiding. In neither scenario does she get the family she wants, and that's what I would rather help her get. It's hard to know what to do when you really can't understand the situation you're dealing with, and the only thing I can tell for certain about all of this is that my daughter can't help being a werewolf. Hey, I just want to say I've been reading this fascinating book about the dogmen and werewolves, written by the late Linda Godfrey. It's a real classic on the subject. I've noticed that there are some sharp discrepancies between her version of a certain famous classic dogman appearance in the 20th century and the History Channel's version of the same event. I'm working on a semi-animated episode using maps and imagery to illustrate visually the two different versions as they're explained. Try to get closer to the truth than possibly anyone has ever gotten before. You know you can get the audiobook version of this important book for only $6 if you follow the link in the description, and you help out our channel if you do. And now for something completely hairy. John K. is all that. He donated to us using Super Chat. Please join me in thanking John K., who was donated to us using our thanks button, which is under our videos on YouTube. If you would like to donate to us that way, we will thank you by making you executive producer of the next available episode. You can also donate to us through one of our 2 clubs, and if you do it that way, you get perks in return. Here to explain the deets is our international TV spokesmongrel, Henry Lee Dogman. Hank?
Thanks, Biggie.
And thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button. Or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that when it cuts off after I think 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.